Hey, Pool Chasers. Thank you for joining us today on episode 45 of the Pool Chasers podcast. Our mission is to help educate and inspire in the form of a podcast.
Oh, yeah. So we got a real treat on this episode. We interview the man, the myth, the legend, Skip Phillips, co-founder of Genesis, the founder of Questar Pool Designs. And let us tell you, it was a real honor getting to know Skip. And just hearing his story, he's got a real roller coaster of a story, starting off in aerospace, pool service, and then building in designs. If you don't know Skip, he's just done a ton of amazing things. So check out the episode, listen to it all the way through, and enjoy.
This is Rick Chafee with Red Rock Contractors and Red Rock Pools coming to you from Gilbert, Arizona. I'm an advisory board member as well as on the educational staff for Genesis Design Group, and you are listening to Pool Chasers Podcast.
Welcome to your go-to podcast for the pool and spa industry. My name is Tyler Rasmussen.
And my name is Greg Villafania, and this is the Pool Chasers Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today, Skip. We really appreciate it.
No, you're welcome. I'm glad to be considered to be a part of it.
Can you please introduce yourself to our listeners and what it is you do exactly?
My name's Skip Phillips. I am the prior owner of Questar Pools and Spas. We sold that design build company, which has been around since 1981 last year. I am the co-founder of Genesis, also own a company called PiTape, which makes precision measuring tapes for turbines and pipelines, and it's based in Tyler, Texas. So I commute between San Diego County and Tyler, Texas. Okay,
very cool. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. So we want to go back in time a little bit. What were you doing before you entered the swimming pool and spa industry?
Actually, I was working for that tool company. My grandfather invented a measuring tape while he worked for Solar Turbines in 1944. They were making exhaust manifolds for the aircraft. And if you wrap this tape around it and use what's called a vernier scale, it would give you the accurate diameter to a thousandth of an inch. And he was able to develop that with an 8th grade education and taught himself calculus and trig. That company, my dad became involved in it in the 60s. He was a calibration technician on the original Atlas missile guidance systems. And so when I was in high school, I worked in that company. So before getting in the pool industry, I actually was working on the measuring tapes.
Oh, very cool. And that company is still around, correct?
Yeah, Carrie and I bought it 11 years ago, moved it to Texas, and it's doing extraordinarily well, probably because I don't spend a lot of time in it. That gives it a chance for success.
Sure. You guys do anything with, like SpaceX, NASA, Boeing, things like that?
All the above. The SpaceX has always been a bit of a challenge, but Boeing, we have a long history with Boeing. We also just did the measuring tape for the 787 Dreamliner, the wing spar layout. We did the Apollo coupling mechanism, standard procedure for what's called hot sections on turbines. So there's a midlife inspection, whether it's GE, Pratt, Rolls-Royce, all the nuclear turbines and hydraulic turbines and dams, and we provide the background measurements for those.
Very cool, very cool. So aerospace and swimming pools, they're, two different things. So how did you get your start in the pool industry? How did you go from, aerospace into pools?
Well, my father came in one day. This was in 1975. So let me think how old I was. 21 or 22 years old.
I'm going to let you do the math on that one.
Yeah. And he said, I want you to go and clean your grandmother's pool. And I said, I don't know anything about that. He goes, well, just give it a try. So I did. I went over and cleaned her pool and nobody got hurt. And it had an old Landon deck filter. And I came back and he says, how would you like to be in the pool business? And I said, well, doing what? He says, well, I just bought a service company and they have a retail store and they clean pools. And I thought that's a huge blessing because being in a temperature controlled room, breathing lacquer thinner versus driving around in cutoffs in a pickup truck sounded like a big upgrade to me. So I got involved in that. I learned how to do repairs. Ultimately, we had 3 stores and 1,100 pools a week on pool service. And I decided I wanted to build pools and design pools. And so I started that in 1979.
Okay. So what was your experience with the pool service company? Was that in California?
Yes.
We've had quite a few people on that have become successful builders, and they started off as, being a service tech or repair person or just owning a pool service and repair business. What did you learn from being in that space to kind of graduating into being a designer and builder?
Well, you learn what not to do on one part of it. It's easily, to me, being in the service industry is easily the most difficult side of the pool spa industry business. Your best day or your best week is, the wind doesn't blow, everybody shows up for work, nobody let the dog out, it didn't get hit by a car, nobody gets in a wreck, nobody bleached the family out by over-chemicaling the pool, and then you hope it doesn't turn green in 7 days when you show back up. So you add the liability of dealing with all these surface finishes, you've got amateurish pool construction, everybody's looking for an opportunity to throw the service guy under the bus for defects that were built in on the pool. So you factor all that in, and it's easily the most difficult part of this business. So for me, I liked the technical side, the concept that you could somehow build a pool and not have any idea on design. You would disregard the soils conditions. You would buy over-the-counter structural engineering, which has potentially no relevance to the execution of the vessel itself. The components are mismatched. It was common to have a 2-inch line on a 2-horsepower pump and a 48-square-foot filter and a single skimmer. If you do the math on all of those components, there isn't any part of that vessel that makes any sense. And then you factor in that the only decent-looking ones were ones that were designed by somebody else, and then you didn't give them credit. You pretended like it was your idea, and you just happened to be the low bidder on somebody else's plan, and then you get to win a design award for that. So my opinion about that, as you can tell, hasn't changed. But it was funny because my dad, he said, "You're kidding, right?" And I said, "No, I'm not kidding. That is the way that industry is, and to a large degree, it still is."
So how about the retail side of the business? What was that like?
It was actually fun. I like people, and after you gained some level of experience and knowledge, having people come in, you develop relationships with them. That side was actually, I think, a lot more enjoyable than the service side. Repair side could be fun, but once again, you've got pools with built-in defects that are uncountable, And so when you go in and you're going to replace a system, and the primary systems are elevated 15 feet above the pool, and they're on the other side of the garage. And you tell the people that from a strictly physics standpoint, this doesn't make any sense. You're never going to be able to prime those pumps effectively. But if you're in your mid-20s, you've never built anything before, and the pool builder who has a license says that that's common practice, or throws out the old term, that meets industry standards. That's an old one, which simply means that's as bad as it can be and still be defensible. But anyway, those systems don't make any sense, and they're everywhere. So sometimes when you would come up with the solutions, it was hard to advance it because you didn't have the credibility to be able to debate whoever put the thing in.
Sure.
Why did your dad get into the pool service, and how were you actually growing the pool service company at that point in time back in the late 70s?
Correct. So we bought the largest company to begin with, bought its next biggest competitor right after that, because we were pursuing it like we meant it. And he decided he'd rather just fold than deal with us pursuing the growth. But we were doing everything wrong. We were shooting gas. We had our own tons. We were doing it all. I'm probably personally responsible for the hole in the ozone layer. But anyway, we were able to grow that because there was some weather conditions, storms that came through, and we were building portable pumps and filters, and we were going out and setting up systems to be able to clean up these pools that were full of mud that couldn't be drained because the water tables were too high. Mm-hmm. And we were able to grow, probably 300 or 400 stops in a relatively short period of time because nobody else was willing to tackle that.
Wow. And it's crazy that even in the late 70s, there were still that many pools that needed to be serviced. Things like education were still not taken that seriously. It was known to the customer that this pool needs to be taken care of by a professional. Was there an education program at that time?
Not as far as I know. Actually, that experience and what I experienced being on the board of the old NSPI and is actually what drove me to decide that there needed to be something better than what we had. And on the Genesis side, we wanted to have service people that took their job seriously, so that if we went to the trouble to develop a system that maybe is a little more complex than they were used to seeing, that it had a flashing amber light, that was not a signal to cut the thing out. That maybe there was some other education or information that we needed for that. So today, both on the service and the construction design side, there is a very sophisticated educational system available. It's just a question of whether people want to take advantage of it.
Sure. When you started the service company, I mean, you obviously cleaned your grandma's pool and that was about it. So what did you do to educate yourself then? If there wasn't like that, how did you learn?
The first thing I did was ride along with someone that was probably the best suited to be able to train others. So once I learned the systems and what to look out for, then the next step was to take a route and start doing the route myself. And then you become much more efficient. Also, you get a chance to learn about some of the things that were going wrong and some indicators when something wasn't right, what to look out for. And then by going into repairs, the systems were pretty simple then compared to today. I remember when we first started getting exposed to remote controls, and an inline chlorinator erosion feeder was sophisticated, at that point in time. I got a chance to kind of learn when the systems were relatively basic, because I think I'm probably pretty simple-minded, so it made it a lot easier for me to learn when things were easy.
And then you just kind of transitioned from that to overseeing the stores and everything?
Well, that's a matter of being able to work with people, but that was hard because most of our pool cleaners were much older than me. So you've got a kid that's 24 or 25 years old that is put into a position to where you have to hold your employees to a standard, and they're all so-called seasoned veterans. It was a challenge.
So I'm curious, out of the 1,100 pools that you were servicing at one time, when you started building pools, how many of those did you go back to and say, hey, I need to build you a new pool because this thing is just not good? Actually,
I don't remember going back initially to any of our service accounts. We had done some basic remodeling efforts, but the first pool, I tried everything to be able to sell these people a pool. I mean, I was taking the whole family out for ice cream. I didn't know how to bid them. At that point in time, I don't think I'd ever really seen one built, even though I took the contractor's license and passed it. When I finally got the opportunity to build it, I remember that. So I drew the plan, and it had, as I recall, everything was freeform. So like 6 or 7 radius points, there was 3 elevation changes. And I remember measuring the backyard with one of those rolling wheels. Mm-hmm. So as I rolled the wheel, I gained distance across the yard, both length and width. So when it came time to dig the pool, there was some obvious flaws. It was a deep end ramp, and the tractor had to back up between 2 gas meters with 6 inches clearance on either side. And when he cleaned the whole yard off, the grass, we went to lay the pool out, and he comes up to me and he goes, "Hey, the pool doesn't fit. Did you measure this thing with a rubber tape?" And so I had to.
Aerospace.
Yeah, problem number one was how do you go and tell your client that you had just sold this pool to that the pool doesn't fit? Obviously the yard didn't shrink. So I had to sit down in the yard and compress all of my radius points and still have it look the same and still meet all the other criteria. So I get that done. Then 2 or 3 passes later, he hooks up with the neighbor's electrical system to their pool, jerks that out of the ground, sparks come out of their time clock, gets down in the hole. There was a high water table, and it was like driving a tractor across a mattress on the bottom of the pool. And then the hydraulic hose blew off and sprayed the entire side of the house with hydraulic fluid. So that was my first day in pool construction.
You fell in love with it, right?
No, I hated it. I went back. My dad says, "What's wrong?" I said, "Yeah, you just can't believe all the things that are going on." And he goes, "Well, what's the worst that can happen?" And I said, "Well, I think it's happening." actually. So I gave him this whole rundown, and he goes, well, what is the cost in this? And I said, well, I got two options. One is I try to restore the yard and just tell them I'm not doing this anymore. And I put their lawn back and I fix all the defects, clean the hydraulic fluid off the side of their house. Or door number two, good friends of mine, Bruce and Jeff Dunn at Mission Pools, they're good friends of mine now. I didn't really know them at that time. But I said, I can call Bruce Dunn and see if he'll come in and put one in and actually know what he's doing. He says, well, what is that going to cost? And I don't know. I think at that time it was, I don't know, $20,000, let's say. He goes, well, Skip, if that's your only risk, he goes, they can't eat you. And so out of my whole life, that's maybe my only takeaway that my dad ever gave me, was to put it into perspective. Okay, you had a bad day, but what if you quit? Well, think about how my life would have been different, and maybe even this industry would be different if I would have quit on the first pool.
Right.
And one of my clients is the heir to WD-40. And if you know the history of that, it stands for water displacement. It was used in 1953 to put on the skins of the Convair missiles, the Atlas missile. But 40 stands for the number of times they tried before they got it right. So what if they would have quit at 37 or 16 or 24? Anyway, I didn't know that at the time. But now that I look back on it, obviously continuing on, my second pool won a design award, which is really more of an indictment of this industry than it is an endorsement of me. But then it was all up, downhill from there. My dad always said that was the prettiest pool I ever did. And those people, when I got it done, the next 10 years that they owned that house, actively sold pools for me.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
That's amazing. So was your father more your mentor growing up, or he just kind of gave little bits of, you just had conversations like that where it was like, what's the worst that can happen in this situation?
He was pretty unsophisticated. He came through the Depression. They lived in a tent. His idea of reprimanding me was to put boxing gloves on. So, my upbringing was a little rough around the edges. But as far as that recommendation, there's been a few things in life that I go to all the time. That one was one. Actually, if you ask me later on, I'm happy to tell you, but the owner of Gulfstream Jets, his story and what he did. Those two things I go to all the time.
Thank you.
What sparked your interest then, I guess, from when you were running the pool service company in the retail store to, what made you decide I want to design, and build pools?
I just wanted to improve. I like the intellectual challenge. And there's when you think about it, the folks that are in the service industry, we just talked about what the best day looks like. The worst day is obviously much, much different than that, but you don't have anything to show for it. All you've got is extended liability on the surface finish. That's the best you can hope for. Now, that's not to say it's not a nice environment. You've got nice people and you're outside and there's all those benefits. But I like the idea, if I was to exit, that there's something behind. There's something tangible left behind. And I think that pool construction, vessel construction design, and is one of those things that does that.
Very good. I think for pool service, I think the coolest thing to look back on was the company you built. That's probably the one thing that you can really be proud of if you built a good culture and you built, a beautiful office. Maybe the aesthetic in the office was really cool and you were very organized in the warehouse and you just had good processes, a place that you could walk in every day and just be proud of what you built, the organization, the team, everything that goes into it. But like you said, as far as the pools go, technicians, they come and go, repair mechanics, they come and go. But usually the office and warehouse and your organization is the one thing that really stays the same.
No, you're absolutely right. That is a benefit. And we were proud of that structure. We were doing things much differently than most other people at that time. So you're absolutely right. And there's relationships that I have now with people that we used to work with or alongside or were employees that are still friends today.
Right.
So how were you kind of educating yourself then on designing and building pools before Genesis? What kind of struggles did you go through to really start to understand that?
Well, the bar was pretty low. Frankly, the people that had done a lot more vessels than me, which was almost everybody, really didn't have any more information than I had. They had just done more of them. When we did our retail store, as an example, I didn't look to the swimming pool industry. I looked to Nordstrom's or Neiman Marcus. When we did our ads, I didn't pay any attention to these. There's nothing wrong with kids jumping into a pool and playing, but all pool ads look that way. But nobody ever spent a lot of money for that. I mean, you can get wet in the shower. You don't necessarily need an expensive pool to do that. So I marketed the lifestyle, and I got that from looking at the way cars are sold, as an example, high-end cars. It was more of a self-education, and then I think it was 82 or 83, the state of California was looking for expert witnesses for the Contractor State License Board. And Bruce Dunn and I were two. There may have been a couple of other ones, but we were like the test people to become expert witnesses. And so my education probably really started then, because when you get drawn into state of California related conflicts or civil litigation, you have to be very conscious of how you communicate. You have to be aware of all the details. You have to be aware of all your industry standards and how to interpret them. Plus, you're working with some of the best people on those cases. So I'm working with engineers, soils engineers. So my education probably by and large came from that.
Right. Do you think some of the leaders in building and designing pools at this time were doing more of the commercial pools for hotels and aquatic facilities, YMCA, things like that? Because they probably had different, regulations. Yeah,
I guess the challenge with that, there's a pro and con. They certainly, especially these Olympic pools, they're held to a very, very high tolerance standard. And certainly there's engineers involved, soils engineers. I mean, they're not done. It's like comparing boats. You got an ocean liner and a rowboat. They're both boats, but it's a completely different format. I would say it's probably easier for somebody with the technical expertise to learn the design part than somebody that pretends to be a designer and turns out shoddy residential pools. That's a very vicious cycle. It's repetitive because other people will see their work and knock off like some of the cosmetic details maybe, but never really understanding why you did it. It's like going to the store and you throw everything in the basket. And you got shear descents and squirters and multiple elevation changes and fire everywhere. And nobody thought about organizing those design principles.
Right.
Oh, buddy, we got a special announcement here.
Yes, we do.
So our friends at Jandy are crushing it with their push to quit the internet.
Crushing it.
We recently made a special trip to San Diego to see their new facility, which is amazing. But most importantly, to get an update on their progress with catching online violators. We had the opportunity of sitting in on their enforcement meeting, and let me tell you, this was taken a lot more seriously than we thought it would. They showed us a chart of violations and, their progress from January till now. They're at 82% attainment of compliance, meaning from day one when they started policing and enforcing to today, they have reduced the number of Jandy violations online by 82%.
It's simple. The customer wants to go online and save a few dollars by purchasing their equipment online. This is something that we've all gone through as service professionals, and Jandy's heard the cry. They've taken a stand and they've supported our industry. They understand that only a qualified pool professional should work around electrical, gas, and hydraulic connections. I mean, have you even seen a customer work with that kind of stuff?
I have, and it's not pretty.
Definitely not pretty. Jandy's warranty will not cover any Jandy equipment that is not purchased, installed, and or serviced by a pool professional. This will save you guys time and money by allowing you to avoid those awkward conversations with your customer and let you focus on the part of the business that you do best. If you want to find out more details, listen to episode 31 of the podcast or go to jandy.com/builtstrong. That's jandy.com/builtstrong. So we're very excited to hear, the story and the history of Genesis. Can you share with us, that story and why the program was started in the first place?
David Tishman and Brian Van Bauer and I were in a meeting in the Bahamas, and it was on design awards. And we were all three critical. We knew each other, but we weren't friends really. And we were critical of the process to where you were constantly handing out design awards, A, to people that didn't design them, which we considered fraud. You were always trying to lower the bar to bring in more awards. So the classic was how they were going to give a design award to the imprint on the outside of a vinyl liner. So if you have an above ground pool with a liner in it, they were going to give a design award to the imprint on the outside of the shell. And then the design award for portable spas, which, like Brian said, you just set it down, plug it in, and throw a rubber duck. Is that all there is to that? But we were so collectively, we were very critical of the process. And there was a guy that said, in particular to David, he says, "You're nothing but an arrogant pig." David said, "You're only part right." He goes, "I'm an arrogant elitist pig, and your stuff still sucks." So obviously the rest of that meeting didn't go well for us.
Right.
So we went out to the bar, and I remember it was raining, and we were kicking around how disenchanted we were with the pool industry in general. And that's when the name Genesis was coined, which was a new beginning. We didn't know what we were going to do with it. And there was 3 of us. So it was Genesis 3. And David was easily the most arrogant. So he was pig number 1. And Brian says that, Skip, you're more arrogant than me. So you're pig number 2. And Brian was pig number 3. So that's how the whole pig thing started. And that's how Genesis was formulated at that time without even knowing what we were going to do with it.
Right. So at this point, did you think that this was going to form into an educational program, or was this just going to be more of a community where you were going to give out better awards? What was the thought and what you were going to do with this whole thing?
Yeah, we really didn't think it out that far. We didn't have the capacity to do an awards program. And the opportunity of what to do with it came a little while later, where Brian and I were in another meeting that had to do with education. And I asked, what if we were to do something where, God forbid, maybe you actually hired people that actually know what they're doing to come in and teach these classes? And instead of having it in the winter in Chicago eating hot dogs, what if we went to someplace nice where the people would be treated as professionals and develop a real educational program? And the CEO of NSPI at the time said, "There's no market for that." And I said, "So you mean this is as good as this gets? What we got right now?" I said, "What if I want to learn about surge tank turbulence or something like that? I mean, where we need an engineer to talk about that." And he goes, "Well, nobody cares about what you want to know." I said, "Really? Half the people in this room are trying to copy me, and they're doing a piss poor job of it." So I said, "You know what? Maybe we should do it ourselves." And the guy said, "I'll give you $100 for anybody over 20. You can coerce to do a program like that." And I said, "You know what? You're on." And I said, "I'm out. I'll do it myself." And I stood up to leave, and Brian stood up to leave. He goes, "No, he won't do it himself. We're going to do it together." And we left the room. And as we left, Jules Field, who was the publisher of Pool and Spa News, ran outside. He goes, "Are you guys really going to do this thing?" I said, "Absolutely. Absolutely, we're going to do this thing." And he was one of our earliest supporters, as well as Bill Kent and Vance Gillette. And we developed a curriculum, and then we published. It was going to be expensive. We chartered a private plane. We flew up to Morro Bay. We found a place to stay. We wanted to be able to go to Hearst Castle as part of the educational program. We wanted to have good food, good wine. We wanted to do it like we meant it. And we had 22 students. I remember being in Morro Bay, and we were pretty nervous because all these people had spent a lot of money to go to this school, and nobody had ever done this before. This fellow walked up, Gene Brown, one of our SWD masters, who was the host for my work permit in Canada for 7 years. It was his father. He walks up and he goes, "Are you the Genesis guys?" And we were a little afraid to say yes, so we said, "Yeah, that's us." And he goes, "This had better be great." He goes, "You only think this is expensive." He goes, "In the loonie in Canada is upside down against the dollar. This had better be great," and walked off. So that was our first introduction to one of the students.
Oh, this is going to be good. So at what point in time were you even thinking that you needed maybe sponsors? What were some of the first sponsors to support Genesis?
Actually, we thought we were going to do one school. We were just poking our eye in the face of these people at the table. So we had the one school and we left on Sunday, and on Monday, I think it was 20 of the 22 students called my office and said, what are we doing next? And I said, what's this we stuff? And he goes, well, you started it. And that's how Genesis started. It was at the end of that first school. They wanted more classes. We had, a lot of the key players in this industry, all supported us. And so there was a small stipend that they kicked in to help keep us afloat. Frankly, the three of us, other than covering our travel, I don't think we earned anything off that company for probably the first 10 or 12 years.
Oh, wow. And do you remember what was really being taught at that first class or that first meetup?
Sure. I actually have some of the original books. So it was balance between construction, hydraulics, design, and presentation. So there was a design component talking about proportion, scale, rhythm, color, balance, so on. Obviously, since then, it's morphed into much more on the design side. We had structural and hydraulic engineering, but it was only, it was a 2-day school. It was a Friday, Saturday. And then a component of that was a special focus tour of Hearst Castle, being able to see two of the most iconic pools in the world and have somebody really knowledgeable about those take us through that. So I did this by memory. I think I did 18 tours of Hearst Castle.
Oh, wow.
You probably do that class myself.
Yeah, I've been there about 3 times. Those pools are definitely iconic. So the greatest pools of all time.
Well, you factor into that it's also sitting in some of the most significant archaeological effects. So our class had to do with putting those two together, which was unheard of in the pool and spa industry.
Oh, that's incredible. Do you know who Slim Aarons is, the photographer?
I've heard the name. I don't know him.
He was a photographer and he always shot, it was really, wealthy people, and he was usually by their homes and a lot of swimming pool shots. But you should go check him out one time. Maybe shot one of your pools and you didn't even know it. Because he didn't shoot photos for builders or anything like that. It was mostly just these, homes in Beverly Hills, San Diego, did stuff in Italy and other places like that. But they were always around swimming pools, which it's really funny because a lot of these photos in movies as well, the water is green, but they didn't think anything of that. Now, if you get to a pool and it's even kind of cloudy, you're like, can't do it today. We need to put some, clarifier in or let the pool run or, whatever we need to do. But you look at these old movies and stuff, it's really funny how, a lot of the pools are green and stuff.
Yeah, totally agree. We actually did a class on photography in Palm Springs, and it had to do with Helen Arowet, who is the owner of Lautner and Associates now, who Lautner was the first one to do vanishing edges in North America. We were able to look at all of those old iconic photos from Palm Springs and mid-century modernism. And in our Vanishing Edge class, we talk about the pool that was used in James Bond, Diamonds Are Forever, is actually a Lautner home. And it's not in Vegas, it's in Palm Springs. But so I love photography. I wrote that down. I'm going to check that out.
Yeah, definitely. I think we were in your, the Construction 308, The Beauty of the Edge. We were in your class with Dave Penton and Paolo. Yeah, that was an amazing class. You guys need to do like a movie or something, hook up with Paramount or something, create a movie on the whole history behind all of it.
Well, I remember you guys up there in the front row. I remember talking to you. So thanks for attending.
Oh, most definitely. It was a lot of fun. Tyler, you know what I saw today?
What'd you see today, Greg?
A husband and wife inside MPT looking to pick out some new tile for their new pool. And you know who was there to help them?
Who?
An MPT expert. And the process seemed to be going pretty smooth.
Well, yeah, I mean, MPT Design Center is the place to go for pool tile, pool finish, hardscapes, and outdoor kitchens. I mean, whether you're building a pool, remodeling it, or just dreaming about it, you can check out their website at mptpool.com to locate an MPT Design Center or showroom near you.
And for all you pool professionals, builders, designers, send your customers to MPT for professional design assistance and product samples they can take home. On the mptpool.com website, you'll also find a wealth of photographs to show what MPT products will look like when they're installed. Plus, you can download a copy of the MPT tile and pool finish catalogs or order a printed copy to be mailed to your home.
So download the MPT mobile app to select products, save favorites, and email them directly to your pool builder. And be sure to follow MPT Pool Products on Instagram and Facebook for the latest photos and product information.
So how did you go from that first meeting to developing some type of curriculum to developing this program? I mean, what was involved with that? It has to be a huge mission there.
Well, over the years, it had a tendency to kind of grow. We went from a single level 1 school, then we had a level 1 and a level 2 school. But I think that what really kicked it into gear was internally within Genesis, we had some challenges with the 3 personalities. And in 2012, Brian and I moved on and with the Genesis brand, and we started over with the educators. We started over with what we were going to focus on, and we also pursued ISET or third-party approval for our educational system. And to me, that was really the big change between 98, 99, and 2012. We were expanding. We were international. We were giving classes in Australia and France and Germany, but it really kicked off, I think, right then, because we had better synergy. There was better synergy within the Genesis organization with our instructors and certainly our key players, because in Genesis, people will look to, let's say, Brian and I as leaders, but the fact is that the leadership in Genesis is very deep. There's a lot of people in that role. Certainly the SWD masters and certified. So we have the benefit of great leadership, and they all helped move this ahead. So often Brian and I get some of the accolades, and I'm blessed to be able to talk to you folks. But really, the strength of Genesis is in its people.
That's really cool of you to say. I mean, it did have to start somewhere, and I think it takes a lot of courage to step up, to the big wigs in the industry at that time, and then go on and try and start something. So we think it's very honorable of you guys to even get it started, because there's a lot of things that we benefited from that. Do you think the internet had a lot to do with getting the word out about Genesis? Because, it's for builders, and there's only so many states that pools are really getting built in. And I'm sure it was much easier to get that word out to the United States and maybe other countries that you guys had an education system.
I think that's true, but the kicker, what would kick people over the edge, was relationships with other people. So when you have the best representatives from the best manufacturers, when they would see somebody that they thought was a good candidate for Genesis, and many times they would sponsor them. They'd come up to them and say, look, you need to go to this school. You'd be an ideal candidate for this school. And then they had friends, and certainly the buying groups. We've got a really strong relationship in particular with now, like with the Master Pool Guild and with CareCraft. Mm-hmm. So we've been the beneficiary of a lot of great relationships. So you're right. A portion of it was certainly the internet, but also having the platform to go to these trade shows and be able to have a venue to run our big classes, our 3-day design and construction classes, but also do some general track stuff, have our booth. Now we have wine and cheese and crackers, and we have all of that.
So what would you say, I guess, I know there was pushback and sometimes still is pushback.
Yeah, well, the largest trade association didn't want us to succeed. Instead of embracing quality education, they would try to eliminate our venues. Like we talked about a little bit earlier, you can't give up. And not only that, just a quick analogy, I was doing a project for Alan Paulson when he owned Gulfstream. He was approached by somebody that wanted to order a new business jet, but the business jet didn't exist. Now, he was already the best in the world. He had big time competition. He had the Lear program. He had Dassault Falcon in France. He had Bombardier in Canada. He had Embraer in Brazil. He had all of these really sophisticated other folks that were advancing their business jets. And in order for him to develop this new jet, which had a different range, a different speed, different payload, he was going to have to invest an incredible amount of money. And if he failed, not only would this person not buy the jet, but it could collapse his company. So he invested in that. It ended up hitting its mark, and he continued on to be arguably the best business jet builder in the world. But I had the ability to ask him that. How do you do that? How do you risk everything when you're already the best, when you already have everything going your way? How in the world do you justify, risking everything? And this was my other takeaway. He says, the best is always temporary. He goes, if you're not advancing, if you're not trying to be better all the time, somebody's catching you from behind. You just don't know it. And he said, I have very sophisticated competition. And so he says, I don't see where I had a choice. So when you think about it, in Genesis, there wasn't anybody else. We could be defeated by the very people that were trying to dumb this industry down. Or we could say, well, we're going to be nimble and light on our feet, and there isn't anything that they can do to stifle us. Not anything. As long as we do well internally, as long as we do what we're supposed to do, we honor our commitment, we try to be the best that we can be, and we give others the opportunity to do that as well, this will succeed. Now, it's not for everybody, but if there's 10,000 pool builders in our realm, and we only are going to approach 10%, that's still 1,000 market leaders. And then you do change the world.
That was awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us. So in 1993, Robb Report came out and declared you as the world's most influential swimming pool designer. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. I probably was the guy that responded to the call. So the good news about that wasn't that necessarily that I got chosen as that influential position. The article was called Club 21. So what was hugely influential is the people that were in the other industries that they had chosen. So I get picked for pools. In fact, the Robb Report had called me up and said, we're considering not even including pools because we find that industry archaic and mundane. So I wrote them back and I said, look, whether you choose me or not is up to you. But you're going to have clothing designers and people that do shoes and stuff like that. It's hard to imagine anything more pedestrian than a pair of shoes. So I think it's unfair to characterize pools in that way. Well, that intrigued them. So they did additional discovery. Well, I got to be in there with Alan Paulson at Gulfstream, Ferrari, Cartier, Armani.
I think Bronson was in there.
Beg your pardon?
The Virgin Mobile.
Oh, yeah. Branson.
Yeah, when he was much younger, but yeah, he was in there.
Yeah, it was huge. It was huge. So that fed on itself. Then I got named number one in Germany, and at that time, I'd never done a pool in Europe. IQ magazine out of Hamburg. So the thing is that Brian and I both, I think, were pretty effective at responding when a magazine or a newspaper or somebody would call up. And we would try to put our best forward, put our best foot forward, but we also tried to put our organization's best foot forward.
Right.
For somebody that doesn't know what Genesis is, can you explain to the listeners what that is? Why it would benefit somebody to attend Genesis classes?
For those that don't think it's important, have to believe that mediocrity is acceptable, that personal growth is not necessary. There's other ways you can do it, perhaps. It's just that Genesis is very targeted to our industry. We're very specific about what we're trying to do. Now, you can get an education. You can go to college, absolutely. But even some of our instructors have said that some of our classes were better than what they took in their master's program as it relates to what we're doing with water and vessels. Genesis is not just an education and a viable certification program. It's a philosophy and it's a family. And that's really its strength, because there's a lot of people that go to school that don't come away with a philosophy or a sense of camaraderie, but we absolutely have that.
That's amazing. And I think the other piece of it that we didn't realize until getting more involved with the podcast and being at the trade shows and things like that is the community of individuals that have been in the program or are currently in the program. It's just it's a very tight-knit community, and they're very proud of going through the Genesis program. And if they've gone on to become a master or something like that, or they're teaching classes, it's really cool that each one of you is talking to, somebody for advice, or, you're just meeting up to discuss, a pool. It's just really cool to have that, to have those relationships. And that's something you can only have when you're with, like-minded individuals. I think that is really an important piece, to have that. It's your guys' tribe. You know what I mean? It's just you guys. There's not really anything else out there like it.
No, it's been a lot of fun. I'm incredibly blessed to have been a part of it. I'm proud of the people that are in that organization, because we weren't the only ones that were swimming upstream. I mean, they were dealing with that on a local level, where, they were trying to do the right type of construction. They were trying to do the right line sizing. And look at all the cards that were stacked against them. Not only do you have the people that are perfectly happy to have big pumps on little pipes, which is dangerous, actually, but then you have a structure that's providing so-called standards that is buying in and removing velocity standards instead of holding people to a higher standard. The standards, is nobody in their right mind would aspire to pursue those standards. That's simply as bad as your product can be and still be defensible.
So I'm curious, did you ever make amends with those people that said that you weren't going to be able to do Genesis? Did those people ever come back and say, you know what, like, apologize for, whatever, it looks like you got one hell of a thing going on here? Or did you at least collect your money?
Well, there's been some of that. I know that once we cleared 200 students, we gave that individual a bill, for the $100 per student. But he's a typical pool guy. He didn't pay his bill. But the thing is, the moral of the story was that we did what we said we were going to do. And we never deviated from trying to be the best that we could be. If we found out that there was information that was valid, that was different or improved over what we were teaching, we immediately changed. And we found out that a core of this industry was using compressive values that are just wrong, just fundamentally wrong. There's no support for it. And we took the position, well, we're not going to do that. We're going to teach an ACI 4,000 PSI minimum. That's what we're going to do. And there's an inspection associated with that. We never deviated from that.
It was probably more motivating you to be the best at it when somebody's telling you can't do it.
Well, we've seen the dark side. I've been an expert witness in over 300 civil, state, and federal cases on workmanship defects. There's no defense for a lot of what this pool industry considers normal. It's just not okay. You can't defend that. What you can defend is that you're trying to be the best you can be, and you're trying to educate yourself and improve. You can do that, but simply digging in your heels and trying to defend substandard construction policies is irresponsible.
Right. What do you think? I mean, just today, 2019, what do you think are still some of the biggest struggles our industry has?
Well, as long as you industrialize mediocrity, as long as you fixate on trying to fabricate credibility to improve sales, I mean, that's fraud. So as long as that's okay, and nobody's calling them out, that's a problem. If you grandfather people around your own standards, that's a problem. We've never changed in our philosophy. We've never changed in how we called that out. Now, that's made a lot of enemies because there's a lot of people that are vested in that. I don't think I could look at myself in the mirror. First off, it's difficult to look at myself in the mirror anyway. but that being said, I could not look at myself in the mirror and recognize that I was subsidizing something that was what I consider to be unscrupulous. I couldn't do that.
So, we definitely believe in the power of education. And, as we continue to do this podcast and meet, like Greg said, different people from Genesis and different masters, we really believe that there's a standard being set there. From the outsider looking in, the prices of the classes and different things can be a little intimidating because you do have to invest in that education. So can you talk on that a little bit?
It's not just money, it's time. To get through that program, unless you can get a waiver because you already have a college class that meets those standards, you're looking at 150 hours. We've actually had some people, I don't know how they did it, but they were actually able to get all 150 hours in 1 year. Which is kind of a stretch because we're in trade shows. We don't do very many standalone programs. Anything that is of value, you pay for. Now, we're not making a killing off Genesis, but we pay our instructors. We try to consistently have quality materials. It's less money now because we're not doing standalone classes like we used to. We had a construction school in Baltimore. We had 60 people there. Imagine all the things that go into that, where you've got room blocks that you have to maintain, you've got attrition, you've got the food, and it has to be a quality experience top to bottom. There isn't any part of that can fail. And when you send out your reviews and people fill them out, typically, I know going in, they were thinking this takes a lot of time and a lot of money to do this. What you see on the way out, and this isn't everyone, obviously, but it's common to say, I wish I had more time and I would have paid more. Now, that's a pretty big spread from when you go in to when you come out.
Right. Thank you. Appreciate you talking on that. So thank you for sharing all that with us. So what involvement do you currently have now in the pool industry these days?
Well, I'm currently still an ambassador for Genesis. I think you guys know 3 years ago, Brian and I sold Genesis to the foundation. We thought that they were a very like-minded organizational structure. There was an attempt a couple of years ago to merge APSP and the foundation. That didn't work out, but there's currently another effort going on to do exactly that. So I don't know what the future holds as far as my personal involvement. I enjoy doing what I'm doing. I still get a chance to design pools. I still get a chance to do work with Bart, the new owner of Questar, and I get to be as an ambassador. Brian says we need diplomatic immunity, but I still get a chance to be able to participate in the programs, and it's a lot of fun, like the program that I saw you guys in. For the foreseeable future, I'll continue to do that. I'm spending most of my time going back and forth between here in Texas to the tool company.
Gotcha. I've heard you talk about the story before about the woman who came to interview at your house, asked you, how much do you use your pool? Can you tell us that story?
Sure. I got a call from Better Homes and Gardens. The writer was based in New York, and she said that she wanted to come out and interview me on what I thought about pools and spas and, maybe why our vessels look different. We went back and forth on when we could actually do that, and we settled on a date, and she came out, she walked in my backyard, and she goes, I've never seen anything like this. I said, well, I could have saved you the trip. I've got 3 in the Hamptons that are pretty nice. It would have been an easier trip for you. So all the writers have a tendency to ask initially the same questions. She goes to her list and she says, how often do you use your pool? And I said, every day when I'm home. And she stops for a second and she goes, it's winter. And I said, well, I know that. She says, what's the temperature of the water? I said, 58. She goes, you go swimming in a 58-degree pool? I said, you didn't ask me if I went swimming. You asked me if I used my pool. And she goes, what's the difference? And I said, didn't you mention it when you came out that you'd never seen anything like this? So my philosophy is if that vessel doesn't have value, if I never swim in it, if I never stick my foot in it, if I never raced electric boats on it with my girls, if I never barbecued out by the pool, if I didn't have coffee with my wife out here in the mornings, if it doesn't have value like that, then it was a waste of time and money. So that's the way I see what we do. There obviously is utilitarian and health values of owning a vessel and psychology values too. But 90% of the time you look at it. So those people that don't believe understanding design, and understanding the terminology to be able to interact with architects and landscape architects and interior decorators, at least learning the terminology and what drives those design processes, they're just kidding themselves.
I really love that story because it just really speaks to what you guys do and that you view pools in a way differently than a lot of people, and really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
So true, because you can look at Dwell magazine or photos online, and just by getting to look at the way these pools are built, just being able to look at an image in a magazine or a book or something on social media and just staring at it for a few minutes and just kind of being mesmerized by what went into that. It's a piece of art, and if it does that, somebody did something right. And you can only imagine the person that lives there, they get out of it every day using it the same way you might have.
Yeah, and the important thing too is recognize the team. Most of these great projects, there was a strong team involved. Even though as somebody that designs pools and used to build pools, it was common to have an architect, a landscape architect involved, and the most important player is obviously the owner. That sees value in some of the things that you're promoting, and the details are driving them. So if you decline to recognize the team and you try to accept the credit all by yourself, that's not a good policy.
Right.
Agree.
So now that you have a little bit more time, maybe from not being so involved with Genesis, the building company, what are you doing for fun? We understand that you're married, you have children, grandchildren. Are you hanging out with them? And do you have any other activities going on?
Yeah. Day after tomorrow, I fly to New Zealand with Paolo Benedetti, and we're going hunting on the South Island. I come back 30 hours later. I leave for Malawi in Africa on a mission trip with my wife and two of my daughters to work in orphanages and put in wells. The tool company, we just achieved, these are certifications that in the pool industry we don't pay any attention to, but when you're dealing with aerospace and the nuclear regulatory agencies and things like that, having ISO 9001 and the 17025 lab certifications, using Renishaw lasers to be able to measure out 5 digits. I'm having a lot of fun with that.
That's so cool.
There's one story you told us, I want to ask it, in the class we took about the hotel that brought you out there and didn't have any type of cleaning system or anything together. Can you share that story with us?
Well, it actually started right after Carrie and I got married. I got a call from St. Lucia, and this fella says, I'm interested. He saw the Robb Report, as a matter of fact. And he goes, I'm interested in bringing in a pool designer, and I wanted to make it appear as if I was well-traveled. So I said, I was just in your hood. And he goes, really? Where'd you stay? And I said, in Sandals in Jamaica. He almost hung up on me. He goes, that's the McDonald's of all resorts. I can't even believe I'm talking to you. And I said, well, wait a minute. It was free. It was a present, So it totally backfired. And he goes, well, that does it. He goes, I'm bringing you out here for a week. And I said, all right. So Carrie and I went out, and the initial designs at Enchancené was on the side of a volcanic cliff. And so we were traipsing around looking for where we were going to put the pool, and I was trying to dress up, so I had on coal hand loafers and carrying a briefcase, and the fella that I was with was a Canadian log road builder. He had spikes on the bottom of his shoes. Finally, I couldn't go any further. I was like hanging from a vine, and he goes, what's wrong, Yank? We're going to lose you here? And I said, I think so. I think we got to go back because I can't make it. So we got a chance to get the design contract, and then years later, as it was being built, I got a call to go out and inspect it as the construction was going on. You have to picture that the construction process is a little archaic. They're building it one bucket of cement at a time. A lot of old lumber and bamboo scaffolding and stuff. 25 vanishing edge pools in suite, some of them 130 feet in the air. So we walk out, and I said, this building looks taller. And he goes, it is. And I said, no, I don't mean just that you made progress. I mean, it looks like it's physically going to be taller than the plans. And he goes, it is. I said, the engineer, he's good with you adding. What did you add? He goes, we added another story. I said, well, there's a pool in that story. And he goes, I know. And I said, but you just built 25 pools at 5 different levels, and there isn't a stick of plumbing in any of them. And he goes, well, that's what I want to talk to you about. So anyway, we came up with a mechanical solution. It was ranked the most romantic place in the Caribbean with just the first display pool built. It's called Jade Mountain. If you ever look it up, it's really a cool place.
Oh, we've seen it. It's an amazing pool and view. Very cool. So we got one last question for you, Skip. What advice would you give somebody that wants to build or design pools? We would love your feedback on, what would you do if you could go back and do things differently?
Well, the core values, I think, are valid. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. So the ability to communicate, to say what you do and do what you say, answer the phone. I mean, those are fundamentals, but you'd be shocked at how many people don't do that. But I really don't believe that anybody is ever good at anything if they don't have a passion for it. I don't care what it is. So if you have a passion for design and construction of pools, it's a lot of fun. There's very few things that, in spite of its challenges, that has the impact of a well-designed and a well-done vessel, the impact it has on the family, the long-term residual effects. It was really, really a lot of fun. And I had great subcontractors that I worked with, where I pulled them aside and said, look, I don't care what you do for anybody else, but I want your very best work. So just give me a price for that. I don't care what anybody else does. And we're all going to share job descriptions. Everybody's going to know what each other's going to do. This isn't about what you're doing for me. Tell me what I can do better. How can I make my plans better? How can I communicate better? How can I schedule better? And one of the things we started with was we had a job site meeting before we ever dug the pool. Now imagine that in the pool industry where all the subs and us and the owners all meet before we put a shovel in the ground. We go over the plans. Is there anything we missed? That relationship, whether it was the relationship with me and my subcontractors or me and my clients or even my subcontractors and the clients, there's no telling how many problems that cured up front.
That's really cool. You allowed people to have a voice and an opinion. Like you said before, you started digging or doing anything. People had the opportunity, no matter what your role was, you had an opportunity to speak up and say something where you might go back to the drawing board and, redesign the way that the pool is going to be built. That's really good.
Well, it's when you think about it, nobody knows everything. And when I met with those folks, I had a wine and cheese dinner. I invited them all, and I said, my job description, what I want to do is I want to be the best in the world at what I do. Now, I can't do that without you or somebody like you. And if you don't want to be that, there's nothing wrong with that. It just means we can't work together.
Right.
Is that where wine and cheese started? Yes.
It's where it started for me. But Brian was the one that drove that. And the fact that we traveled a lot in Europe, I did schools in Italy and Germany, and we, a European trade show is much, much different than they are here in the U.S. And you learn from that and that sense of camaraderie. And there's booths at the Aquanale show in Germany and Piscine and Lyon that it's like having a restaurant. I mean, there's waitresses, they're bringing out home cooked food and wine and beer, and it's common. Everybody wears a coat and tie. It couldn't be more different than it is here in the U.S.
Wow.
Well, it seems like a good way to connect.
Yeah, it's cool.
Cool. Well, where can people go to see your work and, possibly reach out to you? You have website or?
Have Skip at QuestarPools.com. Questar Pools, that website, even though Bart owns it, still is primarily my work. And the education and expert witnessing that I do now is out of Pool Spa Technologies. So my email in that company is skip@poolspatech.com.
Well, thank you very much, Skip. It's been a real honor talking with you, and we truly appreciate, everything you've done to make the industry better. So thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you.
No, thanks for including me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you all for listening. We appreciate you giving us your time and your ear. If you're not following us on social media platforms yet, we are providing great content on there as well. So please check us out on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Our tag is Pool Chasers. If you're interested in helping support the podcast and get access to great bonus content, as well as an opportunity to record a bonus episode or even a full episode with us, you can go to patreon.com/Pool Chasers. That's patreon.com/Pool Chasers. And did you know that you can also subscribe to the podcast so that you get updated every time a new episode is released? So if you're not subscribed yet, please do so. And if you like what you hear, please take the time to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and all other major podcast platforms. Also, check out the Pool Chasers Facebook page. This is a place for like-minded pool professionals to ask questions, share knowledge, and come together as a community to help better the industry. Thank you all for the support. We truly appreciate it.
See you out there, Pool Chasers.